Dior is one of the most powerful names in fashion. It is the crown jewel of LVMH, the largest luxury conglomerate on the planet. It represents, at least in theory, the absolute pinnacle of French craftsmanship, heritage, and taste. But in the summer of 2024, Italian prosecutors released a set of numbers that changed everything. Numbers so damning, so simple, and so impossible to spin that they shattered the entire mythology the luxury industry has spent decades building. And what happened next was even worse, because the investigation didn't stop at Dior. More than a year later, it reached Loro Piana. Then prosecutors demanded records from names like Gucci, Prada, and Dolce and Gabbana. And in its most recent and most damning expansion, it reached Chanel, Moncler, and Brunello Cucinelli. This is no longer a scandal. This is a systemic exposure, and the details are far darker than most people realize. So what exactly did the prosecutors find? How deep does this go? And why is the industry still pretending it's business as usual? To understand the scale of this, we have to go back to June 2024. For years, there had been whispers about the reality of luxury manufacturing. But whispers are easy to ignore when the marketing is loud enough. That changed when the Milan court system released a ruling that sent shockwaves through the entire fashion industry. Italian prosecutors had been quietly investigating the supply chains of LVMH. Specifically, they were looking at manufacturers Dior SRL, the Italian subsidiary responsible for producing Christian Dior handbags. What they found was not a sunlit atelier. It was a nightmare. Dior had subcontracted the manufacturing of its handbags to Chinese-owned firms operating near Milan. Inside these factories, the conditions were indistinguishable from the worst fast fashion sweatshops. Some workers were undocumented, and others were working without the required paperwork. Not highly paid artisans, but vulnerable laborers trapped in an exploitative system. The investigation revealed that workers were literally sleeping on the factory floors, so the machines could run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. To maximize production speed, the subcontractors had deliberately removed the safety guards from the gluing and brushing machinery. They prioritized the speed of stamping leather over the physical safety of the human beings operating the machines. And what were these workers paid? As little as 2 to 3 euros an hour. In Milan, in 2024, in factories producing goods for a brand that generated over 8 billion euros in revenue that same year, they were working in conditions prosecutors said fell far below legal and ethical standards. If they were injured by the unguarded machinery, there was no recourse. If they complained, they would be replaced by the next desperate person in line. The system was designed to make them invisible, disposable, and silent. But the most damning revelation wasn't the conditions. It was the math. Contractors were able to charge Dior as little as 53 euros to supply a leather handbag. That same Dior model was then retailed in boutiques for 2,600 euros. That is a markup of nearly 4,800%. The Milan court didn't just issue a fine. They placed Dior's Italian manufacturing unit under judicial administration for a full year. A humiliating public rebuke for a brand that has built its entire identity on heritage and excellence. But Dior wasn't alone. 2 months earlier, the spotlight had already turned to Giorgio Armani. Armani has always positioned itself as the pinnacle of sophisticated, ethical Italian design. But the prosecutors found the exact same playbook. Armani's operations company had outsourced production to a supplier, who then subcontracted the work to unauthorized Chinese-owned factories. Same conditions: undocumented workers, grueling hours, removed safety devices, poverty wages. And once again, the math was staggering. The bags were sold to Armani's subcontractors for 93 euros, resold to Armani for 250 euros, and then put on the market for about 1,800 euros, a markup of nearly 1,900%. Not as extreme as Dior's, but still a number that makes the artisanal craftsmanship narrative completely impossible to defend. And this is Giorgio Armani we're talking about. A brand that has spent 40 years cultivating an image of quiet integrity, of doing things properly, of being above the chaos of the fashion industry. If even Armani's supply chain is rotten, what does that say about the rest? The Made in Italy stamp, which consumers believed was a guarantee of ethical labor and superior quality, was exposed as a geographic technicality. By law, a product can carry that label if the final substantial phase of manufacturing occurs within Italy's borders. The luxury conglomerates realized they didn't need to outsource to developing nations. They could import the sweatshop model to the outskirts of Milan, exploit vulnerable immigrant labor, and still legally stamp Made in Italy on the inside of a $3,000 bag. It was the perfect illusion, hidden in plain sight. And it had been running, unchallenged, for years. Now, the standard corporate defense was predictable. Both Dior and Armani claimed they were shocked. They had no idea. This was the fault of rogue subcontractors who violated their strict codes of conduct. But the prosecutors weren't buying it. And here's why. The luxury supply chain doesn't operate in a simple, transparent line from brand to factory. It operates in layers. The brand contracts an official supplier. That supplier subcontracts to a smaller firm. That firm subcontracts again to an even smaller workshop. Each layer takes a cut of the margin, which is why by the time the work reaches the actual human being stitching the leather, the pay has been compressed to $2 an hour. The brands may claim they didn't know. But when the numbers are this extreme, that becomes harder and harder to believe. They have entire compliance departments. They have auditors. They have the resources to trace every single stitch back to its origin, but they choose not to. Because the layered system gives them plausible deniability. They can point to the official supplier and say, "We paid them a fair price. What they did with that money is their responsibility." But when you are paying €53 for a leather handbag in Italy, you know exactly what kind of labor that price demands. The math doesn't lie. You cannot produce a quality leather bag in a first world country, paying fair wages and providing safe conditions for €53. It is physically impossible. At some point, the numbers become impossible to ignore. They outsource the cruelty, but they keep the profits. And the distance between the boardroom and the factory floor is maintained by design, not by accident, but by architecture. It is a system built specifically so that no single executive ever has to look a worker in the eye. After the Dior and Armani revelations, the luxury industry hoped the storm would pass. The playbook was familiar. Apologize, pledge reform, wait for the news cycle to move on. Dior committed €2 million over 5 years to combat worker exploitation. That sounds significant until you do the math. LVMH's annual revenue exceeds €86 billion. That pledge represents 0.002% of their yearly income. €2 million is what LVMH generates in revenue roughly every 12 minutes. It is, by any measure, an insult dressed up as accountability. But the Italian prosecutors weren't finished. In December 2025, the Carabinieri labor unit in Milan escalated. They visited the headquarters of 13 more high-end fashion firms, including Gucci, Prada, and Dolce Gabbana. They demanded governance records and supply chain documentation. By then, Loro Piana had already been pulled in too. This is significant because Loro Piana is the brand that billionaires wear when they think Hermès is too flashy. It is the ultimate, quiet luxury house, owned by LVMH, selling cashmere sweaters for $3,000. It markets itself as the most ethical, most exclusive, most above-it-all brand in the world. And it was placed under temporary judicial administration for the same supply chain abuses. If Loro Piana isn't safe, nobody is. In total, 7 fashion groups were placed under court-appointed administration before the measures were eventually lifted. The courts released them only after they proved they had brought their practices into compliance, but the prosecutors kept pulling the thread. Which brings us to July 2026. While most of the fashion world was focused on pre-fall collections and resort wear previews, the Carabinieri were executing their largest coordinated operation yet. Italian police visited the headquarters of 9 more of the most prestigious luxury brands in the world, demanding their supply chain records: Chanel, Bulgari, Moncler, Brunello Cucinelli, Goyard, Etro, Stefano Ricci, Jacob Cohen, Rick Owens. The police walked into these pristine corporate offices, not to admire the clothes, but to follow the paperwork. Now it is crucial to understand. None of these 9 companies are officially under criminal investigation. The prosecutors have not sought court-appointed administration for any of them. What they are doing is demanding proof, forcing these brands to hand over paperwork to demonstrate whether or not they knew their suppliers were using sweatshops. But why these specific 9 brands? During earlier raids on workshops near Milan, the police found products and subcontracting documents linking 2 Chinese-owned sweatshops directly to suppliers named Brandart and FVL. Those suppliers provided goods directly to these 9 fashion houses. And here is the twist that makes this story even more disturbing. These workshops weren't making the handbags. They weren't stitching the leather or assembling the hardware. They were making the packaging, the garment bags, the shopping bags, the premium dust pouches, the heavy cardboard boxes that the luxury items are presented in. Think about what that means for a moment. The luxury experience is designed from the outside in. Before you even touch the product, you are meant to feel the weight of the box, the texture of the tissue paper, the quality of the ribbon. Every single element is engineered to reinforce the idea that you are participating in something exceptional. It is theater. And it turns out that even the stage props, the literal packaging of the illusion, were produced under the same exploitative conditions as the products themselves. The undocumented worker sleeping on the concrete floor isn't just stitching the leather. They are folding the tissue paper. They are gluing the shopping bags. They are constructing the very illusion of luxury that consumers pay thousands of dollars to experience. Brunello Cucinelli, a brand that has built its entire identity on humanistic capitalism and ethical treatment of workers, was forced to issue a statement saying they were surprised and deeply saddened that part of the materials intended for its packaging were found at an unsuitable workplace. Surprised by their own supply chain, and perhaps the most revealing detail in this entire saga is the response from the Italian government itself. You would expect the state to side with the exploited workers. You would expect outrage, new legislation, stricter enforcement. Throughout this saga, Italy's industry minister Adolfo Urso has repeatedly framed the reputation of Italian luxury brands as being under attack. Not the workers, the brands. The first instinct seemed to be protecting the industry's image rather than centering the human beings being exploited within it. Because the luxury sector is one of Italy's most valuable economic engines, it employs hundreds of thousands of people, generates billions in exports, and defines Italy's global identity. The government has a financial incentive to make this story go away as quietly as possible. And that is the final layer of this system. The brands exploit the workers. The subcontractors enable the exploitation. The compliance departments look the other way. And the government's first instinct seemed to be protecting the reputation of Made in Italy. Everyone profits except the person actually making the product. And the cruelest irony of all? The consumers who buy these products often do so precisely because they believe they are making an ethical choice. They tell themselves that by paying more, they are supporting fair labor, traditional craftsmanship, and sustainable practices. They are choosing quality over quantity, heritage over fast fashion. They believe the premium price is the price of doing things right. But the premium price is just the price of the lie. So where does this leave us? This does not mean every luxury product is fake or every artisan story is a lie. But it does mean the industry can no longer ask consumers to believe in craftsmanship without showing them the proof. The investigation has now touched dozens of brands and suppliers in one form or another. Some were placed under court administration. Others were asked to provide documents. But taken together, the pattern is becoming harder to ignore. And the timing couldn't be worse for luxury. These brands are already facing declining sales across Asia, a consumer base exhausted by relentless price hikes and growing skepticism from a younger generation that demands transparency. The mythology of luxury was already under pressure. Now, the courts have provided the receipts. The luxury industry is being forced to confront the gap between what it sells and what can happen inside the supply chains that make the dream possible. For decades, These brands benefited from secrecy. The consumer rarely saw the factory floor. They relied on the fact that most people would never know who made the leather, the dust bag, the box, or the shopping bag. But that secrecy is beginning to break. The €53 price tag is now public knowledge. The workshops have been raided, the packaging has been traced, and consumers are watching. So the next time you see a pristine shopping bag, hold a heavy, perfectly structured box, or feel that familiar rush of luxury, the question is no longer just whether the product is beautiful. The question is whether the story behind it can still be trusted. Because luxury only works when the dream feels real. And if brands want consumers to keep paying for heritage, ethics, and craftsmanship, they may have to do more than tell the story. They may have to prove it. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.